Hello and welcome to From the Be All End, the Burnley podcast. Now, Bert and Ernie, Toval and Dean, Fish and Chips. I'm running out. I'm Morecambe and Wise.
Benny and Ott, yeah.
Benny and Ott.
Yeah.
All incredible duos. And you lucky devils listening on a Monday morning, because you've got myself, Andrew Greaves, and Mr. Paul Woodhouse all the way from Cleveland, Ohio. So Greaves and Woodhouse, which has a sound of some kind of Fry and Laurie type period drama.
Yes, try not to big it up too much.
Yeah. Just the two of us tonight. Unfortunately, Chris Borden out celebrating his birthday. Simon getting ready for the Hyper Bowl or whatever they call it in America, that kind of American rugby final that's on next weekend. And Justin Connolly under the weather, the latest to be hit with injury or illness that has ripped its way through the From the Be All End pod squad over the last couple of weeks. I think in essence none of them wanted to relive Pompey 0, Burnley 0. But Woody, we are here, aren't we? We're going to relive it. We're going to try and pick some positives.
Yeah.
Have you had the Jumbotron out? Have you been kind of moving players around and looking at sequences and things? What did you make of it, first of all? It wasn't a classic, but as you pointed out, just as we came on to record, it also wasn't our worst, was it?
No, not by a stretch. And I think we've kind of got to take it in a couple of different ways, or maybe three ways. Yes, there's the overarching 0-0, not creating anything. That's sending everybody into a loop. Let's put that to one side. If you look at the game in isolation and the way that Portsmouth particularly went about the business, and they aren't muppets at home by any stretch, and they showed that yesterday. And they played relatively well on the front foot. They were aggressive. They got round the side. And considering the way that the game went and the way that they played, then a point, even though we didn't play well, was probably not a bad effort, because you can see how they get results at home and how well we defended, particularly against that endless attack down each flank and then whipping balls across. And we repelled pretty much everything. And then there's the piece about, on another day, we may have taken one or two chances, even though they're still at an obvious premium and looked even more scarce yesterday. And then there's the penalty, where it's hit both hands. The only thing Dazelle didn't manage to do was bounce it a couple of times and roll it out to the fullback.
Yeah.
And so you take those three things in kind of consideration as far as I'm concerned. Yes, we probably didn't deserve anything more than a point, but we could quite easily have nicked it as well. But we do need to do something with the remainder of this window in order to get that little bit of quality that we've spoken about, to unlock sides and break them down.
Yeah, we'll come on to the penalty perhaps in a bit more detail, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I think Stan Turnant used to use the term blind man on a galloping horse, and I think, the blind man on a galloping horse could have been at the other side of Hampshire and they'd have still seen the handball. And I think you said in our WhatsApp group, VAR gives that twice over, doesn't it? It's ridiculous. But we will perhaps come on to the referee and that decision. But I think you're right. I mean, I think for me, I thought Portsmouth looked fantastic. They're kind of positioning the table, Scott Parker, quick to point out, at home. They've taken some scalps at home, and they've scored. They've certainly scored a hell of a lot more than we have at home in a lot of those games, a couple of 3-1s and a 4-1. Part of the problem is, I think we, of course, we all go there confident. I think we said on the podcast, this is the kind of game you go into with confidence, I'm not quite sure whether that is misplaced confidence or not, but I do think it's one of those where we don't want to use the word entitlement because we've done it several times, but we don't have a God-given right to go anywhere and get a result, do we? And if it wasn't for James Trafford towards the end of the game with an incredible double save, he repels one and then he comes out and spreads himself, Schmeichel-esque, really, for such a, for a lad who's a bit smaller. Certainly a lot of courage from young Traff. Teams down that are fighting for their life, aren't they? You know what I mean? They're scrapping. And one of the things is with these teams, and Oxford was the same at the start of the season, they had a brilliant start to the season at home, and perhaps tailed off. And And Portsmouth wars are probably on the road rather than at home. It's a funny old division, isn't it? And it's kind of sometimes you've just got to go, you know what, we're really pissed off that it's another 0-0. Record breaking. We've now moved on to 10 0-0 draws, beating Sunderland, I think it was, who was on 9. Trafford's got the club record for most minutes without conceding as well. So a couple of records ticked off over the weekend. But, I mean, you know, yes, we do want to be entertained. It is an entertainment business as well as a results business. But we should tip a hat to Portsmouth, shouldn't we? Because they, the amount of, we've seen a lot of shit teams this year who come and just have no interest in playing football. But, yeah, they caused us a bit of a scare, didn't they? I don't think our two centre-halves, Egan Riley and Esteve, were probably having their best games either. Everyone looked a little bit sloppy for me.
It was a very different test, wasn't it? That endless, like we say, going down the flanks and whipping balls across. And that's something slightly different, and it's a fairly tight place, is Fratton Park as well, isn't it? So they obviously utilise that to their advantage, and yeah, there were. I think it was Laurent that ridiculous ball he played in the first half just to their guy, and it like you say, it was all a little bit sloppy. We weren't able to get any kind of momentum. The pitch wasn't necessarily helping. We were having to go long, and they were coming at us, and it was all a little bit more, like you said, scrappy, hair 'em, scare 'em, backs to the wall type stuff than really trying to being able to play out from the back. And when we aren't allowed to control the ball as we want to, we sometimes fall a little bit short, don't we? We've seen this time and again.
Yeah, I mean, we lost Josh Brownhill in the build-up. He obviously came off against Leeds. We think it's a rib injury. I know the CBS commentator over in your part of the world was trying to flog him to Celtic like some weird Dell boy on a Saturday morning, weren't he? But I think, from what we...
Yeah, 2 for the price of 1, yeah.
Yeah, from what we gather, it's an injury, and there's, we'll get to the end of today as you're listening, tomorrow as we're recording, and Brownhill will probably still be a Burnley player and perhaps, seek that move to Celtic when he's out of contract in the summer. And I think it's a cracking move for him. We've talked about his quality, and I think he'll be very good in one of the 2 Old Firm sides, and it's probably a nice big move for him. But in terms of the kind of setup, I mean, Sarmiento for me really flatters to deceive. One of the other changes was obviously Perez coming in for Humphreys. Did we miss a bit of Bashir Humphreys? I mean, clearly, Scott Parker, when we're up against these so-called lesser sides or, perhaps away from home, he'll go with Perez because he wants that attacking threat. Perez, to me, he really struggles to get any rhythm to his game. He's kind of... I don't know, he's very sloppy at times. The amount of time he plays the ball back inside straight to them. But, and I think Phil Bird on the comms that I was watching, said we perhaps missed a bit of Bashir Humphreys. And do you think Humphreys can feel a little bit hard done to? Because he's kind of proven himself that attacking threat, which we all thought Perez was, crosses for goals for Fleming already, including the one at Blackburn Rovers. Do you think Bashir Humphreys could be slightly aggrieved to miss out on a starting place against Pompey?
It's a funny one. We said it on the last pod, I think, with Sam, wasn't it? That we're not entirely sure that Perez is the better attacking option. And probably if you look at assists, well, he's probably got 2, and maybe Perez has got 1, and I think he's probably flat, and that's probably against Luton, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it was the Luton game where he probably flattered to deceive a little bit and hasn't necessarily lived up to that level of performance since. And like you say, there are more aberrations to his game, either wayward passes and that ability to somehow constantly mistime the idea of closing a man down. It doesn't even turn into a challenge. And that doesn't seem to have improved. So for me, Humphreys feels like the slightly better bet, really, out of the 2. It doesn't seem to be... I don't see the point of trying to play these horses for courses thing, whereas if we thinking we want to be on the front foot, but we play Perez, then we want to be slightly defensive, you'd want to play Humphreys. Because to me, yesterday felt more like in hindsight, more of a Humphreys type left back that we needed, rather as opposed to Pires. I don't know about you.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely spot on. For me, when I was watching it, I'm kind of thinking, you know what, we didn't really get hold of their wingers. You know, we give away a lot of free kicks in wide areas.
Yes, that's
little
fair.
nudges, little pushes, and, you know, Anthony was guilty at times. Pires was guilty at times. Roberts was guilty at times. You know, Roberts perhaps ever so slightly lucky not to pick up a second yellow, you know, for two challenges. I think the fact that he kind of stayed down holding his face a little bit because he'd got, you know, the hand across. But again, just one of the frustrating things for me was looking at that forward line where you had a number 9 playing in a number 7 role, you had a number 7 playing in a number 10 role, and you had a number 10 playing in a number 9 role. It just felt like, listen, you know, we've had a bit of success with Lyle out wide, albeit against lesser sides. Sarmiento, as I said, flattest to deceive for me. He's kind of, you know, and he's probably one of these who needs a run in the side because he's a bit in and out. Is it time to kind of stop this kind of experiment? And of course, you know, whatever happens today, transfer deadline day, will perhaps dictate that, and we'll come on to a couple of, you know, a couple of rumours, one really strong and one getting stronger. As we, you know, in a couple of minutes. But it does feel like we should just start playing players in position, should we? I know Sarmiento likes to drift inside, but, you know, he does have a bit of success out on the wing.
It's a very old-fashioned thought, isn't it, playing people in their correct positions?
It is, isn't it?
You know, maybe we should try it once in a while. I mean, yeah, it sounds like, obviously, we don't know whether Colin Oshaw may have started yesterday.
Yeah.
But he picked something up on Friday, didn't he?
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's worked once against Plymouth. It was appalling against Leeds, and it was still appalling yesterday.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you would like to think, or most of the point, we really do have to sort it out. Again, it seems like there's this constant tinkering. And again, I'll probably guarantee I'll probably put some money on the fact that we'll wind up beating Oxford because we've just had 2 0-0 draws. Yeah. And that seems to be the pattern, doesn't it? Something works, he tinkers a little bit. That doesn't work. We have 2 lesser type performances, then he tinkers again, and we go and play something where we think we've turned a corner again, and then it reverts back to type. And we need players, especially up top, who can unlock, play that ball, go, you know, at least take these off chances and just be a little bit cuter and be a little bit trickier. And that's what we're crying out for. We've been crying out for it all season, haven't we, really?
Yeah. And the substitutions, I mean, Hannibal came into the game and did look to try and get us on the front foot to an extent. You know, I blow a hot and cold when it comes to Hannibal and his effectiveness. But then it almost felt a bit strange kind of bringing Barnes on with, you know, a minute and a half plus injury time to go. We've kind of talked about Barnsley perhaps being a bit of an expensive PR move. Does the fact that Jay Rodriguez has left to join Wrexham, and I noticed he started and played 70 minutes, I think it was, of their game, to be replaced by Stephen Fletcher, which is, again, he's a real kind of brilliant throwback picture of those two in the celebrating together. But, I mean, well, we have got a couple of targets that we're looking at. You know, Mark Guiu from Chelsea, Spanish striker, was at Barcelona, has done well for Chelsea in the Conference League. You know, he feels like it's come from left field. I know there's a few Championship clubs kind of looking at him, but you just wonder whether has that focused the mind in terms of, look, we've lost Gerrard. I know Jay's not really been playing very much, and you kind of almost expect Barnes to be the next cab off the rank as that kind of experience there. But it feels like finally in this window we're being linked with strikers as opposed to, you know, we've been linked with a few wingers, and we'll perhaps come on to Marcus Edwards in a second as well.
Yeah, finally, yeah, like you say. It doesn't just feel like it's somebody to make up the numbers. You can see that obviously something's going on if J-Rod's being shoved off to Wrexham, then that's clearing a wage because we're obviously signing somebody of some calibre. Then, if you get... I mean, granted, we know Edwards hasn't played that much this past season, has he? And so we don't quite know what we're getting, but it's still the Championship, and if you can flicker into any sort of form, then it's quite a signing, quietly away, and what we'd arguably be crying out for. There's absolutely no way that you wouldn't have a half-fit, half-firing Edwards anywhere across, especially either either wing or number 10 is tailor-made for that, isn't it? And then a different option, Guiu up front, then it sounds like potentially we're at least asking the right questions of the transfer market and trying to upgrade. And there's even an element of the marquee signings about it. So I think we should be happy about that. How it pans out is yet to be seen, isn't it? But they are the types of signings I think we should be quite excited about. Yeah, I still think there's probably some midfield to be sorted out somewhere along the lines, but we shall wait and see.
Yeah, I think we were, we were kind of like almost dismissing it in terms of, we're fine, it's a waste of money, we said in the newsletter from the bln.substack.com if you've not yet signed up. But in terms of kind of his start to the season looked good. I think he got kind of 3 goals in 10 games before, kind of up to the end of November, I think it was. 1 in 6 in the league. He'd played in the Champions League. He got 2 goals in a Portuguese Cup game as well, a League Cup game, I think it is. So there's definitely something there. I mean, I dismissed it a couple of days ago. A mate sent me the room, and I was like, he ain't signing for Burnley. The guy's playing Champions League football to a certain extent, but he has had a bit of injury. He's clearly a hard worker because he's in that, in that really good sporting side that, we all know kind of what's happened to their manager since leaving, and the hard work. So he's clearly a hard worker, and he was rated at about 30 million just a season ago. So it does feel like a kind of, the transfer department that we have and the number crunchers are looking and kind of going, hang on a minute, this looks a bit of a interesting signing. The Mark Guiu one kind of came out of nowhere. That's kind of appeared today, and we take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt. But just the fact that we are now with 24 hours as we record this to go, just over 24 hours to the transfer window slamming shut, because nobody ever shuts it carefully. We are starting to just perhaps get, even us who don't really get excited that much, perhaps getting a little bit excited in terms of, we're still within touching distance of that top 2. Results really didn't go our way this weekend with Leeds and Sheffield United both winning, Leeds rather comfortably. But it could be that kind of consistency at the back and then getting these reinforcements in the final third. It could just tip the momentum, because, Championship's all about momentum, back towards us, if not completely in our favour, couldn't it?
That's exactly right. All it took in the last Championship season was to keep bringing Benny off the bench and nobody working out how he cut in from the left and whack it in the top left-hand corner. If you missed half of those, it wouldn't have been anywhere near as comfortable as it was. And again, all we need is that little bit of a talismanic figure. It's just that little bit of a spark. If these things, I was just watching Arsenal versus City, apart from those 2 early aberrations where they just gifted them a couple of goals and Pep Ball had turned into VK Ball, the final 3 goals were all, great Premier League efforts that the positions that we saw yesterday, a Premier League striker scores. Yeah. And that's what we're missing. Yeah. And it becomes a very different, story if you start taking and crafting these half chances. It becomes a very different league altogether. And we know how it works. When we last week after we'd beaten Plymouth, we'd turned a corner. Now we're not going to make automatics. And, it's just silly talk constantly. It's that idea of being able to string results together. Then hopefully somebody like an Edwards, and we've said it before, getting folks fit, that turns a corner, because there is far too quality in some of these names for this particular division that we haven't had all season, and we're still in with more than a shout. So, yes.
Yeah, and just looking at the table, I mean, Middlesbrough in 7th, the kind of final place outside of the playoffs on 44 points. Claret's on 58 points. Beyond that, you've got Norwich and Bristol City and Sheffield Wednesday on 42. I mean, the playoffs look secured, don't they? You know what I mean? If you're looking at milestones, that 14-point gap, it's a hell of a swing given the fact that, you know, we've kind of played most of those sides away from home, and we've got some of those sides to come. Is there and I saw this, I think somebody mentioned this on Up the Clarets on the message board there, and I kind of thought that's a really interesting point. Is there now an opportunity for us to take more risks? I mean, we've often talked about the defensive record becoming a bit of a burden to a certain extent, which, you know, it should never be, because it's an incredible record. But do you think kind of, you know, you look at that and go, look, we're pretty much guaranteed playoffs. You know, 14 points clear of dropping out of that. In essence, you know, that's a huge swing. Something would have to go horribly wrong defensively, given it. Is it now time to take more risks and actually, you know, concede 1 or 2 goals for the greater good of sharpening ourselves up at the other end of the pitch?
I think that's a very interesting point. And I think, now I come to think of it, probably does make quite a little bit of sense. And maybe that's what some of these names and these signings are hinting towards. I think we want to be playing a different style of football. I think we want to be winning games, but we have to have that personnel in order to do it. But I agree, you've also got to play a little bit differently, and you have to take a few more risks as opposed to being as horribly risk averse as we currently are. But it's got us to where we are. So why, you know, we know perfectly well that you can push on, string some results together, and you're quite easily back in the top 2, and quite comfortably in that top 2. So yeah, I think it's a fair point to say, yes, we have that cushion, and barring an absolute aberration, we're going to be in and about the playoff spots quite comfortably. So yeah, we probably should start taking a few more risks, especially with the run that we've got coming now.
Yeah, it almost feels a bit of a kind of, you know, if you've got this risk-averse kind of nature because you want to make sure you're in at least in the playoffs, you've kind of met that, haven't you? It's the old kind of get to 40 points and then see where you are, because you're not going to get relegated. Get to 30 points, 35 points in the Premier League. Talking to a Crystal Palace fan a bit earlier, obviously very delighted at the result against United, but he said, you know, 30 points, right, you know, we can kick on. You know, you then kind of go, right, let's string some results together, because we're not... You know, we're not worried about kind of like risking it and losing 3 on the bounce and getting sucked into that kind of bottom 3. You know, you can be a bit more open, and it is weird that we kind of, you know, see lots of, I don't know what's like green shoots of, right, we've turned this corner. How many times have we said the words "turn the corner"? You know, on this podcast, even just tonight, you know, recording now, it's like, once you turn the corner, you want to be able to keep going. You don't want to kind of look back around the corner to see what's happening, do you? It's a bit like kind of, you've gone now, just...
Yeah, exactly. It's not supposed to be a cul-de-sac or a roundabout, is it? It's supposed to be turn that corner and then straight line. And
straight line running,
yeah. But yeah, you're exactly right, and I don't know why we keep doing the Winston White and just doing crop circles, honestly. Yeah.
Well, we mentioned the run. I mean, Oxford United at home tomorrow night, rearranged from Saturday because we're in cup action. It's another one of those, isn't it? I mean, it was the game down at Oxford was one of those kind of like running through treacle type games. It is kind of another one of those tests. They are probably going to be one of those sides who sit probably a little bit more than Pompey did at Fram Park on Saturday. It could look completely different if we get 1 or 2 signings in, and you know, especially if we get them in, this morning ahead of any deadlines or what have you. But, you've also got Shelvey and Benson on the bench. You mentioned Benny and he's, cutting in from the left. We're starting to see that bench look a bit different, aren't we? And do you expect Scott Parker, with the games coming thick and fast, to perhaps shake things up a bit? I'm not sure we'll see either of those two start, but, perhaps a Hannibal coming back in because, something's not worked. If Brownhill's fit again, we'd obviously expect him to come back in, probably Humphreys to come back in. Do you think now's a good time to, let's see if we can start freshening it up a bit? Because we've kind of relied on the same starting 11, barring the Pires, Humphreys kind of switch about for the last few games, haven't we?
Yeah, and I think Parker hinted at it a little bit in his post-match interview. We will look at and see, because he sounded like it wasn't necessarily the performance he was looking at, and that certain things needed to be looked at and addressed. So what that means, I'm not entirely sure, but I think you could probably take away from it that he may change things around a little bit, because I think the best little corner that we turned was the midfield that included Hannibal on the left by quite a distance.
Yeah,
that seemed to work as well as anything has worked all season. So whether he reverts to something a little bit more like that, because we know that if we leave ourselves to be overrun in the middle, we get overrun in the middle, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
So hopefully he's learned that, Parker in particular. So we'll see. I think he probably will, because I think we need to do something slightly different. Because, like you say, Oxford at their place, they were a difficult proposition, and I thought played pretty well.
Yeah.
All told, and they
had a brilliant home record at that point, didn't they?
Yes.
So again, it wasn't a gimme that was gonna
exactly.
We were gonna go there and roll them over.
Yeah, and it's not, and especially we know our home form isn't the best, so we know that we have to take the game to them. We have to learn how to unlock sides, and so we have to be more attacking, because games will run out, and a different kind of pressure will start to tell if you aren't able to start getting results at home and you're relying on away performances and it suddenly gets a little bit trickier as the season runs out. So yeah, he'll have to tweak something, and we'll have to tweak it in the direction of something a little bit more of an attacking threat, I would have thought.
Yeah, and Oxford in not too bad a form. Just looking at some of their results, since the turn of the year, won away at Millwall, drew away at North End, got knocked out of the cup by Exeter City, drew away at Plymouth, beat Blackburn Rovers, beat Luton Town at home, drew at Stoke, and then yesterday, probably a disappointing result for them, 1-1 draw against 9-men Bristol City. They're kind of, quietly grinding out a few results. Another one of those sides who probably, are not in any serious threat of getting relegated, but 16th in the table. We need something to kind of try and get that Turf Moor crowd off their seats, don't they? I mean, I'm kind of going to end up with piles if I'm sat on that cold seat without moving much longer. It's, there's not been a lot to cheer about, has there? And, if we're going to be kind of brand Burnley, I can't imagine there's many people over your neck of the woods, desperate to tune in on CBS for Burnley versus Oxford United on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, for the people who know I'm a Burnley fan over here, I've had 0 texts about them this year, so that tells you all you need to know. I really don't think they're tuning in. So, and yeah, not many. We're a hard side to big up at the minute. It really is a bit of a stretch especially in a country and a sporting culture that just gives people opportunity to score. The idea of not even attempting to score is quite an anathema to American sport. So Burnley are a very, very difficult watch for those folks, But yes, even to just get people wriggling about on the seats, it'd be enough, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of. I had a bit of a kind of woke up from a weird dream the other morning, thinking that we were. I wanted to reintroduce those American-style penalty shootouts that MLS had for the first couple of years, because the Americans hate a draw, don't they? It's the reason they hate cricket, is that you can play for 5 days and still not get a result, kind of thing. But I mean, one good thing just before we end in terms of the game against Oxford United, I believe Billy Hamilton's the half-time guest. I'm sure I read that somewhere. So. Given the fact that Billy's back, we'll at least get some cheers at half time before Mr. Shouty Man asks him what was it like when you came to Turf Moor? What was your favourite moment? Are you still in the game? Well, he's not. He used to own a trophy shop actually, and back in Northern Ireland, I think. But yeah, Billy Hamilton. You'll remember Billy Hamilton, won't you? He's slightly before my time. My dad used to bang on quite a bit about Billy, but. What's your kind of abiding memory of Billy Hamilton just before we finish?
You wanna be asking Simon. Billy Hamilton is one of his is one of his little heroes. But I mean, Billy Hamilton getting onto the end of a cross. That's it. End of story. If somebody could do a flying header, then it was Billy Hamilton. No two ways about it.
Perhaps need him back in
yes,
and passing on some tips to the Burnley strikers. But yeah, did read that he was going to be the half-time guest, the VIP guest. Hopefully we'll get him on the pitch at half-time. That'd be always good to see someone like Billy Hamilton. I do enjoy watching old videos of that Burnley team with Billy in there. But just before we go as well, just want to say a big hello to one of our Australian listeners, Sean Ashworth. His godson Cristiano works with my wife at Burnley College. I think Cristiano's out there in Perth at the minute, perhaps staying with Sean. But yeah, Sean Ashworth, massive claret out in Perth, in Australia. Big listener, big fan of the show as well. So hope you enjoyed this. We tried to be as kind of positive as we can. Perhaps when the window shuts, if we've got any kind of big signings, then perhaps we'll all come back together and do a kind of post-transfer window podcast. And of course, we've kind of jinxed the last couple of results because Simon made us come on and do a quick reaction to Plymouth 0, Burnley 5, and we've been shite since, haven't we? So maybe we'll tempt that fate again if we stick 5 or 6 past Oxford on Tuesday night. But maybe that's wishful thinking. Massive thanks to Woody for joining me. I'd been very, very lonely if it had just been me talking through it. So thank you very much, buddy. And yeah, if we don't see you or you don't hear from us before the Friday episode, don't forget you can still sign up to the Substack. We've been absolutely blown away by the amount of people who've signed up to that, so thank you very, very much for doing so. We've got another issue coming out tomorrow with some kind of post-match reaction, player ratings, and a look ahead to those transfers or potential transfers as well. So from the beallend.substack.com, completely free to sign up, a couple of times a week in your inbox, and you can also listen to the podcast through the Substack app. So enjoy the start of the week. Hopefully we'll see some goals at Turf Moor tomorrow. Hopefully we'll see a couple of new signings, perhaps paraded around the pitch, if not on the bench or in the starting lineup. But until we see you again or you hear from us again, up the clarets.
How many times do I have to tell you? Stop moaning!
Not going anywhere.